My mother's voice was soft the way it always was right before she delivered a fatal blow. It was a cultivated softness, the kind honed in Swiss finishing schools and perfected over decades of hosting charity galas for Manhattan's elite. It was the sound of silk wrapping around a knife. "Norma, darling." Constance said, the static of the phone line doing nothing to mask the condescension dripping from her words. "Your father and I have been discussing the seating arrangements for Saturday, for Beatrice's big day." I gripped the phone tighter. I was standing in my workshop in dusty overalls, the smell of linseed oil and sawdust filling the air. It was a stark contrast to the world Constance inhabited, a world of crystal flutes and sterile perfection. "I already RSVP'd Mother. I'm at table 14 near the kitchen doors." I remember. "Yes, well." She sighed, a long, weary exhalation that suggested dealing with me was a burden comparable to a famine or a plague. "That's actually what we need to discuss. You see, the guest list has expanded. Senator Whitman is attending, and the Vanderbilt cousins are flying in from Newport. We simply don't have the space." I paused. The wedding was being held at the Hawthorns, our family's ancestral estate in the Hudson Valley. The ballroom alone could hold 500 people. They had invited 300. "You don't have space." "It's not just the space, Norma. It's the aesthetics." Her voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and cruel. "Beatrice is marrying into the Rothschild connection. This wedding is going to be in town and country. We have to present a unified front of excellence. And frankly, your current situation, your profession, your hands, your vehicle, it doesn't fit the narrative. You understand, don't you? We're trying to protect you from embarrassment. You wouldn't be comfortable." She wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to erase me. For 45 years, I had been the stain on the pristine white tablecloth of the falsified family history. I was the daughter who preferred woodworking to waltzing, the one who looked too much like my father's common mother and not enough like Constance's patrician ancestors. "So you're uninviting me," I said, my voice flat, "to my own sister's wedding." "Don't be dramatic, Norma. It's so pedestrian. We'll send you a lovely album of the photographs, and really it's for the best. You'd only be sitting in the back feeling resentful. This way Beatrice can shine without any distractions. Just stay in that little shop of yours. It's where you belong." She hung up before I could respond. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a lonely monochromatic sound. I lowered the phone and looked around my studio. It was a converted barn filled with broken things waiting to be made whole. Antique chairs with shattered legs, cabinets with peeling veneer clocks that had forgotten how to tell time. This was my life. I fixed things. I stripped away the rot and revealed the beauty underneath. But my parents, they were the opposite. They took perfectly good things, people, relationships, truths, and covered them in layers of lacquer and lies until they suffocated. My father, Sterling, was a man who measured worth in stock options and club memberships. My sister, Beatrice, was his masterpiece, a 30-year-old lawyer with hair like spun gold and a heart like a frozen pond. And I was Norma, the mistake, the afterthought. I walked over to the workbench in the center of the room. Sitting there was the only inheritance I had ever received from this family. When my great-aunt Agatha died 2 years ago, she left the bulk of her fortune, the stocks, the bonds, the liquid assets, to Sterling and Constance. To Beatrice, she left her jewelry collection insured for $3 million. To me, she left a box. It was a dilapidated 19th century campaign desk, a portable writing slope made of rosewood that looked like it had been dragged through a war zone. The wood was scarred, the brass hinges were green with oxidation, and it was locked tight with no key. When the executor of the will handed it to me, my mother had laughed. "Appropriate," she had said. "Junk for the junk collector." I had left it sitting on my bench for 2 years, too painful to touch. Agatha had been the only one who ever loved me, the only one who snuck me cookies when Constance put me on a diet at age 8. The only one who told me my hands were capable, not clumsy. I couldn't understand why she would leave me something so broken. But after that phone call, after the realization that my family didn't just dislike me, they were ashamed of me, something inside me snapped. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I picked up a fine point chisel. "All right, Aunt Agatha," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what you were trying to tell me." Agatha wasn't like the rest of them. She was Sterling's aunt, my grandfather's sister, but she carried herself with a different kind of authority. While my parents flitted about seeking approval from society columns, Agatha sat in her library at the Hawthorns, smoking thin cigarettes and reading legal briefs. She had never married a fact that Constance whispered about as a tragedy, but which Agatha wore like a badge of honor. "Marriage is a business contract, Norma," she told me once when I was 12 and crying because a boy at the country club dance called me sturdy. "And most women sign bad deals. I preferred to keep my equity." She was the one who bought the Hawthorns back in the 1970s when the family had nearly lost it to insolvency. My father liked to tell people he had restored the family legacy, but the truth was Agatha wrote the check. She allowed my parents to live there, to raise us there, to pretend they owned the manor house with its 20 bedrooms and rolling manicured lawns. But everyone inside the family knew the truth. Agatha held the deed. When she got sick, things changed. Sterling and Constance became very attentive. They moved her from the master suite to a smaller guest room on the ground floor. For her safety, they claimed. They fired her longtime nurse and hired a private agency. They restricted her visitors. I tried to see her. God knows I tried. Every Sunday I'd drive my battered Ford truck up the gravel driveway, and every Sunday Constance would meet me at the door with a sad smile. "She's not up for it today, Norma. She's confused. She doesn't recognize anyone. It would only upset her to see you." I believed them. That was my mistake. I believed that despite their cruelty to me, they wouldn't lie about a dying woman. Then came the funeral. It was a grand affair, naturally. Beatrice wore black Prada and cried delicately into a lace handkerchief. Sterling gave a eulogy about Agatha's generosity of spirit, which was code for, "Thank God she's dead, so we can finally cash out." The reading of the will was the final insult. We sat in the lawyer's office, Arthur Pendleton, an old man who looked as ancient as the furniture. He read the bequests in a dry, rattling voice. The millions to Sterling, the jewels to Beatrice. And then, to my great-niece Norma, who has the hands of an artisan and the heart of a lion, I leave my personal writing slope. It is locked, as are many things in this family. I trust she has the patience to find the way in. Sterling had snorted. "Senile to the end. That old box has been rotting in the attic for 50 years. Now standing in my workshop, the memory of that day fueled my hands. I ran my fingers over the rosewood. It wasn't just broken. It was defensive. The grain was obscured by layers of grime, but beneath it I could see the quality of the timber. Brazilian rosewood. Illegal to trade, now priceless. I started with the hinges. They were encrusted with decades of polish and neglect. I applied a solvent, working it in with a toothbrush, watching the green verdigris dissolve to reveal gleaming brass. As I worked, I thought about the wedding. Saturday, noon, the Hawthorns. Beatrice would be wearing a custom gown from Paris. Sterling would be drinking scotch that cost more than my monthly mortgage. They would be standing on the terrified earth of the garden, laughing, toasting, celebrating their dominion over the world. And they didn't want me there because I was a reminder of the one thing they couldn't buy: authenticity. My scraper caught on something. I stopped. On the bottom of the writing slope, beneath a layer of felt that had been glued down sloppily. Too sloppily for a piece of this quality, there was a seam. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, but my fingers, trained to find cracks in veneer, felt the slight ridge. It wasn't just a writing desk. It was a puzzle box. Agatha loved puzzles. She used to do the Sunday crossword in ink. She taught me chess. She wouldn't just give me a box, I realized. She gave me a test. I grabbed a heat gun and gently warmed the felt, peeling it back inch by inch. Underneath, the wood was inlaid with an intricate pattern of mother-of-pearl stars. 7 stars. The Pleiades. Agatha's favorite constellation. The third star was slightly depressed. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed the first and the seventh together. A soft click echoed in the quiet workshop. The side panel of the desk popped open a fraction of an inch. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a standard drawer. It was a hidden compartment deep within the structure of the desk, insulated from the main storage area. I pulled the drawer out. It slid smoothly, the internal mechanism protected from the decay that marred the outside. Inside there was no jewelry, no gold coins, just a single thick envelope made of heavy cream linen paper sealed with red wax. The wax bore Agatha's personal seal, a hawk in flight. And sitting on top of the envelope was a smaller note written in shaky, spidery handwriting, the handwriting of a woman nearing the end, fighting to get the words down before the darkness took her. "My dearest Norma," it read. "If you are reading this, then you were smart enough to look beneath the surface. I knew you would be. You are the only one of them who ever looked at me and saw a person, not a bank account." I took a breath, the air in the workshop suddenly feeling thin. "Your father thinks he owns the Hawthorns. He thinks he owns the legacy. But ownership is a matter of law, not ego. Read the enclosed documents. And then, my brave girl, I want you to go to the wedding. I want you to give them a gift they will never forget." I looked at the date on the letter. It was written 3 days before she died. I broke the seal on the large envelope. The documents were heavy bound in blue legal backing. As I read the first page, the technical language swirled before my eyes, but the meaning was unmistakable. It was a deed of trust, and behind it, a notarized affidavit signed by Agatha and witnessed by Arthur Pendleton. I read it once. Then I sat down on my stool, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight, and read it again. It was a transfer of title. 2 years before her death, when my parents first started isolating her, Agatha had quietly transferred the ownership of the Hawthorns, the land, the manor, the stables, everything into a holding trust. The Agatha Vance Revocable Trust. Upon her death, the trust became irrevocable, and the sole beneficiary of the trust was Norma Vance. Me. But there was a clause, a life estate provision that was devilishly clever. It stated that Sterling and Constance were permitted to reside in the property for a period of exactly 24 months following Agatha's death to allow them time to arrange their affairs. 24 months. I checked the date of Agatha's death. September 14th, 2 years ago. Today was September 12th. The wedding was September 15th. My parents' right to live in that house, their legal claim to the roof over their heads, expired the day before the wedding. As of midnight on Friday, they were trespassing. I flipped to the affidavit. It was a sworn statement from Agatha detailing the abuse she had suffered. "My nephew Sterling has threatened to put me in a state facility if I do not sign over the deed. He restricts my food. He restricts my access to my attorney. He believes I am incompetent. I am not. I am simply old, and I am surrounded by vultures. I am hiding this document in the one place I know they will never look something broken, because they discard broken things. Only Norma values them." Tears stung my eyes, hot and fierce. They had tormented her. They had imprisoned an 80-year-old woman in her own home, waiting for her to die so they could seize the kingdom. And all the while, she had been plotting this. She had been waiting for me to find it. She knew I wouldn't open the box immediately. She knew I would need time to grieve, or perhaps she knew the mechanism would take me time to solve. But the timing, it was almost supernatural. "You knew," I whispered, touching the paper. "You knew they would try to cut me out." I looked at the uninvitation in a new light. My mother wasn't just embarrassed by me. She was terrified of me, even if she didn't know why. Deep down, they knew they were frauds. They knew they were squatting in a palace built on another woman's dime. I stood up. The sadness was gone. The hesitation was gone. Constance had said I wouldn't be comfortable at the wedding. She had said it was a matter of aesthetics. She was right. The aesthetic of lies was about to clash violently with the aesthetic of truth. I looked at the calendar. It was Wednesday. I had 3 days to prepare. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. The document said Arthur Pendleton was the trustee until the transfer was finalized. I knew Arthur. He was a good man pushed into the shadows by my father's aggressive new legal team. If Arthur was still alive, he would be at that wedding. Agatha would have made sure of it. I spent the next 2 days working on the box itself. I didn't restore it to look new. I didn't sand away the scars or the burns. Instead, I cleaned it, oiled it, and polished the brass until it glowed like gold fire. I lined the interior with emerald velvet. I made it beautiful, but I kept its history visible. It looked like what it was, a survivor. On Friday night, I went to my closet. I didn't have a gown. I didn't have diamonds. I had a simple charcoal gray dress suit that I wore for client meetings. It was tailored severe and commanded respect. I polished my boots. I pulled my silver-streaked hair back into a tight chignon. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a Whitford or a Vance or a Rothschild. I looked like a judge. I placed the documents back into the secret compartment along with Agatha's letter. I locked the mechanism. Then I walked out to my truck. It was a 2015 Ford F-150 dented on the bumper, filled with tools. Constance hated it. She called it a monstrosity. Tomorrow I was going to drive that monstrosity right up to the front steps of the Hawthorns. Saturday morning broke with a sky of aggressive, piercing blue. It was the kind of weather rich people paid for: low humidity, golden sunlight, a gentle breeze to rustle the silk of the marquee tents. The drive to the Hawthorns took 2 hours. As I turned off the highway and onto the private road that led to the estate, my stomach tightened. Not with fear, but with anticipation. It was the feeling of a roller coaster cresting the highest peak. A security checkpoint had been set up a mile from the main house. 2 men in black suits and earpieces stood by a temporary barrier. They looked like Secret Service agents hired to keep the riffraff out. I rolled down my window. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. "Name?" the guard asked, clipboard in hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at the truck with open disdain. "Norma Vance," I said. He scanned the list. His finger went down one page, then the next. He frowned. "I don't have a Norma Vance on the guest list, ma'am. I have a staff list. Are you with the florists?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm the sister of the bride." The guard paused. He looked at me, then back at the truck, then down at his list. He radioed his partner. "We have a claims to be the sister, driving a Ford pickup. Name is Norma." He listened to the earpiece. His expression hardened. "Ma'am, I've been instructed that the immediate family is already on site. I'm going to have to ask you to turn around." "I'm not turning around," I said, putting the truck into park but leaving the engine running. "Check the list again, or call my father Sterling. Tell him I have Aunt Agatha's gift." "Ma'am, you need to leave or we will have you removed." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "You're standing on private property. Do you know who owns it?" "Mr. Sterling Vance." "Wrong," I said. "But we'll clear that up later. Listen to me. I am going to that wedding. You can either let me through, or I can park this truck right here sideways and block every single limousine behind me. I see the senator's motorcade approaching in the rearview mirror. Do you really want to explain to Senator Whitman why he's stuck behind a gardener's truck? Because you wouldn't let the bride's sister in." The guard looked behind me. Sure enough, 3 black SUVs were approaching. He looked panicked. The optics of a scene at the gate were exactly what Constance feared most. He tapped his earpiece. "Let her through. Get her out of the way. Park her in the back lot behind the stables." He waved me through. "Go, quickly." I drove past him, catching the eye of the senator in the car behind me. I nodded. He looked confused. I didn't go to the back lot. I drove up the main alley lined with century-old oak trees. The house rose up before me, a sprawling Georgian masterpiece of brick and ivy. It looked majestic. It looked impenetrable. And it was mine. I parked the truck right in front of the valet stand, sandwiched between a Bentley and a Rolls-Royce. The valet, a young boy named Timothy, who used to go to school with my niece, looked at me with wide eyes. "Miss Norma." "Hello, Timothy," I said, stepping out and smoothing my jacket. I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out the rosewood box. It was heavy, grounding. "Keep it close, would you? But don't move it." "Your mother is going to kill me," he whispered. "No, she isn't," I said. "She doesn't have the authority." I walked up the stone steps. The ceremony was in the south garden around the back. I could hear the string quartet playing Vivaldi. The air was thick with the scent of white roses, thousands of them imported, no doubt. I slipped through the side entrance, bypassing the receiving line. I knew the house better than anyone. I knew the servants' passages, the hidden doors, and the library. I made my way to the terrace overlooking the garden. Below me, 400 people sat on white Chiavari chairs. The women wore hats that looked like confectionery sculptures. The men wore morning suits. It was a sea of pastel and privilege. I saw Constance in the front row wearing a silver dress that cost more than my truck. She looked tense, her neck rigid. Sterling was standing at the altar, looking puffed up and important. Beatrice was just starting her walk down the aisle, a vision in white lace, looking every inch the princess of the manor. I leaned against a marble pillar in the shadows of the terrace. I wasn't there to ruin the ceremony. I would let them have their vows. I would let them have their moment of fantasy. But the reception was for the truth. The ceremony was nauseatingly perfect. Beatrice and her groom, a handsome, vacuous man named Hamilton, exchanged vows that sounded like they had been written by a PR firm. They promised to build empires together and uphold the legacy of their forebears. I watched from the periphery. A few guests spotted me. I saw elbows nudging ribs. I saw whispers behind gloved hands. Isn't that the other one? The rough one. I thought she wasn't invited. Look at her shoes. Are those work boots? Good heavens, Constance must be mortified. I stood stoically clutching the box. I saw Cousin Gwendolyn, a woman who had once asked me if I cleaned houses for a living, pointing at me and giggling with her husband. After the I do's, the crowd moved to the Grand Marquis for the reception. It was a cathedral of canvas draped in silk with crystal chandeliers suspended from the ceiling. I waited until everyone was seated. I found table 14, the table Constance had mentioned, tucked away near the catering entrance next to the bathrooms. It was empty. They hadn't even set a place for me. They had removed the chair. I didn't care. I didn't sit. I stood near the main stage, hidden by a massive floral arrangement of hydrangeas. The speeches began. The best man told a frat boy story that made everyone chuckle politely. The maid of honor cried. Then Sterling took the microphone. The room went silent. My father loved a captive audience. He swirled his champagne glass, looking out over the crowd with a benevolent, kingly smile. "My friends," he began, his voice booming, "today is a day of triumph. Not just for Beatrice and Hamilton, but for the Vance family. When I look at this estate, this home that my grandfather built, and that I have poured my blood, sweat, and tears into preserving," I tightened my grip on the box. "Your blood, your sweat. You haven't lifted a finger since 1982. It brings me such joy," Sterling continued, "to know that the legacy is secure. Beatrice, my darling, you have always been the bright star of this family. You embody the grace, the intelligence, and the dignity of the Hawthorns." He paused for effect. "There has been much speculation about the future of this estate. Many of you know that my late Aunt Agatha passed recently. There were complications. Rumors." He chuckled dismissively. "But we have weathered the storm, and today I am proud to make an announcement." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a large velvet-bound folder. "As a wedding gift to the happy couple, Constance and I have decided to pass the torch. We are deeding Rosewood Estate the Hawthorns to Beatrice and Hamilton effective immediately. It is yours, my dear. The house, the grounds, the legacy. It will be the foundation of your new life." The crowd erupted. Gasps of awe, thunderous applause. Beatrice covered her mouth, feigning shock tears streaming down her face. It was the ultimate power move, a property worth $50 million gifted like a trinket. It was also a lie. He couldn't gift it. He didn't own it. The applause began to die down as Sterling raised his glass for a toast. "To the new lord and lady of the manor." "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it projected. I stepped out from behind the flowers. The room didn't hear me at first. "Excuse me," I shouted, my voice cracking like a whip across the marquee. Silence rippled outward from the stage row by row until 400 faces were turned toward me. Sterling froze. His smile faltered, then hardened into a mask of fury. Constance, seated at the head table, went pale as a sheet. She stood up halfway, her hand reaching out as if to physically restrain me from across the room. "Norma," Sterling barked, his voice losing its jovial warmth. "What are you doing here? You were told—" "I was told it was a matter of aesthetics," I said, walking slowly toward the stage. The crowd parted for me. I could feel their eyes judging, confused, horrified. "I was told I wouldn't fit in. But since you're handing out gifts, Father, I thought I should deliver mine." I reached the steps of the stage. Beatrice looked down at me with pure venom. "Get out, Norma. You're ruining everything. Look at you. You're a mess." "I have a gift for you, Beatrice," I said, ignoring her insult. I lifted the rosewood box. "From Aunt Agatha." "Security!" Constance shrieked. It was a shrill, undignified sound that silenced the murmuring crowd. "Get her out of here! She's drunk! She's unstable!" Two security guards, the ones from the gate, started moving toward the stage. "I wouldn't do that," a voice called out from the second row of tables. An elderly man stood up. He was leaning on a cane, wearing a suit that was 20 years out of style, but impeccably pressed. It was Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur," Sterling squinted. "Sit down. This is a family matter." "It is a legal matter," Arthur said, his voice raspy but firm. He stepped out into the aisle. "And as the executor of the late Agatha Vance's estate, I advise you to let Miss Norma speak. If you remove her, I will be forced to file a police report for theft of inheritance before the cake is cut." The threat hung in the air. Theft. The word was ugly, incongruous with the champagne and silk. Sterling hesitated. He looked at the senator. He looked at the Rothschild cousins. He realized that dragging his daughter off stage screaming would be a far greater scandal than letting her hand over a box. "Fine," Sterling hissed, leaning down to me. "Give her the damn box and get out. You have 2 minutes." I walked up the stairs. I stood next to Beatrice. Up close, I could see the heavy makeup trying to hide the stress lines around her eyes. She smelled of fear and hairspray. I placed the rosewood desk on the table in front of the wedding cake. "It's just a dirty old box," Beatrice sneered, playing to the crowd. "Did you pull this out of the trash, Norma?" "Open it," I said. "I don't want your garbage." "It's not my garbage, it's Agatha's. And if you don't open it, I will, and I'll read what's inside to the senator myself." Beatrice scoffed, rolling her eyes. She reached out with a manicured hand and flipped the brass latch. She expected a lid to lift. Nothing happened. She tugged at it. "It's broken? Just like you." "It's not broken," I said softly. "It's a puzzle. You have to know where to look. You have to know the history." I stepped forward. 7 stars," I said loud enough for the microphone to catch. "The Pleiades. Agatha taught us that, remember, or were you too busy learning how to pose for photos?" I pressed the stars. The click was audible over the sound system. The side drawer slid open. The crowd gasped. It was a piece of theater better than anything Sterling had planned. Beatrice stared at the drawer. There's just papers." "Read the letter," I said. "The one on top." Beatrice picked up the handwritten note. Her hand started to tremble. She recognized the handwriting. "Read it," I commanded. I. I can't." "Then I will." I snatched the letter from her hand. Sterling lunged for me. "Give me that!" Arthur Pendleton slammed his cane onto the floor. "Let her read," he shouted. I held the letter up to the microphone. "My dearest Norma." I read, my voice steady, echoing through the silent tent. "If you are reading this, then the vultures have finally circled. I am sorry I could not protect you in life. I was weak, and they were hungry." I looked at Constance. She had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands. "Your father Sterling is a man of great appetite but little talent. He has spent the last 30 years draining the family accounts. He believes I do not know about the loans, the second mortgages, the gambling debts." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Senator Whitman leaned forward. The bankers in the room exchanged dark looks. "He trapped me in my own home." I continued reading. "He threatened me. He told me I was losing my mind. But I was not mad. I was merely heartbroken to see what my brother's son had become." "Lies!" Sterling shouted. "She was senile. Everyone knows she was crazy. He will try to give this house to Beatrice." The letter went on, predicting the exact moment we were living in. "He will try to use my legacy to buy his way into a new fortune. But he cannot give what he does not own." I put the letter down and picked up the blue-bound legal document. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a deed of trust, dated September 14th, 2 years ago. It transfers the title of the Hawthorns and all surrounding lands to the Norma Vance Trust." I turned to Beatrice. "You don't own this house, Beatrice. Mom and Dad don't own this house. I own this house." Beatrice looked at her father. "Daddy, what is she talking about?" Sterling was sweating profusely. "It's a forgery. It's a trick." And, I continued, "there was a clause, a life estate clause. It allowed my parents to live here for exactly 24 months after Agatha's death. That period expired yesterday." I looked out at the crowd. "My parents are trespassing, and so I'm afraid are all of you." Arthur Pendleton made his way to the stage. He moved slowly but with the gravity of an executioner. He took the microphone from me. "I am Arthur Pendleton, senior partner at Pendleton and Associates. I notarized these documents myself. I videotaped the signing to prove competency. Agatha Vance was sound of mind." He turned to Sterling. "You knew, Sterling. You knew the deadline was coming. That's why you rushed the wedding. You thought if you gifted the house to Beatrice today, it would muddy the waters. You thought you could hide behind a new title transfer before Norma found the box." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Sterling sputtered, but his eyes were darting around, looking for an exit. "The deed is recorded with the county," Arthur said. "It is ironclad. Norma Vance is the sole owner of this estate, and given the bad faith clause regarding the treatment of the grantor, Agatha Norma has the right to evict immediately." Beatrice began to cry. Not the pretty single tear crying of the ceremony, ugly heaving sobs. But this is my wedding. You can't take my house, I told everyone. It's in the magazines." She turned to me, her face twisted with rage. "You did this on purpose. You waited until today. You spiteful, jealous little—" "I didn't wait," I said calmly. "I found out 3 days ago, when Mom called to uninvite me. If you had treated me with an ounce of kindness, if you had just let me come and sit at table 14, I might have waited. I might have worked something out. But you wanted to erase me." I gestured to the ballroom. "Well, I'm here now." The fallout was immediate. The groom Hamilton looked at his new father-in-law with horror. You don't own the estate, the settlement, the collateral." "Hamilton, please," Sterling begged. "It's a misunderstanding. We'll fight it in court." "With what money?" I asked. "The letter says you're broke, Dad, and since I own the house, I'm certainly not paying your legal fees." Constance stood up. She walked up the stairs trembling. She didn't look at Sterling. She looked at me. For the first time in my life, she looked at me with something other than disdain. She looked at me with need. Norma, she whispered. Darling, please. Not today. Don't do this today. We can discuss this. We're family. Family, I laughed. You told me I didn't fit the aesthetic mother. You told me I belonged in the workshop. I was stressed, she pleaded. I wanted everything to be perfect for your sister. You know how sensitive she is. I know, I said, and I know how cruel you are. I looked at the guests. 400 of the wealthiest people in New York were watching the House of Vance crumble in real time. I'm not going to kick you out today, I said, my voice projecting clearly. I'm not like you. I don't humiliate people for sport. Beatrice stopped crying. Sterling looked up hopeful. Finish your party, I said. Eat the cake, drink the champagne. But tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. the locks will be changed. Constance Sterling. You have until noon tomorrow to vacate the premises. You can take your personal effects. The furniture, the art, and the antiques stay. They belong to the trust. You can't be serious, Sterling said. Where will we go? I hear the guest cottage is empty, I said. The one you put Aunt Agatha in. It's small and the heating is bad, but I'm sure you'll be comfortable. It's very cozy. I turned to Beatrice. And as for you, you can have the apartment in the city, the one Dad bought for his mistress. The crowd gasped again. Sterling went white. Constance let out a small shriek and turned to her husband, slapping him across the face. Pandemonium broke out. The groom's mother fainted. The Rothschild cousins were frantically texting. I picked up the rosewood box. Enjoy the wedding, I said. I walked down the stairs and through the center aisle. This time no one whispered. No one laughed. They parted like the Red Sea, staring at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I walked out of the marquee, down the stone steps, and back to my truck. Timothy the valet was standing there, mouth open. Did you just fire your parents? He asked. Something like that, Timothy, I said. I handed him $100 bill. Keep the change. I drove away from the Hawthorns as the sun began to set. I didn't look back. The next few months were a blur of lawyers and logistics. Sterling tried to sue, of course, but Arthur Pendleton destroyed him in court. The revelations about the gambling debts and the mistreatment of Agatha turned society against them. Constance divorced Sterling 3 months later. Beatrice's marriage lasted 6 months before Hamilton got an annulment based on fraudulent representation of assets. I moved into the Hawthorns. I didn't keep it as a shrine to vanity. I turned the ballroom into a gallery for local artisans. I turned the stables into a workshop where I taught restoration classes. I opened the gardens to the public on weekends. I let my parents stay in the guest cottage for 6 months, then I asked them to leave. They moved to a condo in Florida. We don't talk much. Constance sends me Christmas cards trying to wiggle her way back in, but I leave them unopened. Sometimes late at night I sit in Aunt Agatha's library. I sit at the rosewood desk, which I restored fully now. The brass shines. The wood is warm. I think about the power of silence. I think about how they spent their whole lives screaming about their importance while Agatha quietly wrote her truth on a piece of paper and hid it in the dark. They thought I was nothing because I was quiet. They thought I was weak because I was kind. They didn't understand that the strongest things in the world are the ones that can endure being broken. I am Norma Vance. I am a restorer of broken things. And finally, after 45 years, I fixed the biggest crack in my life. I cut them out. And the silence. It is beautiful. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever had to cut ties to save your own soul? If this story resonated with you, if you know what it feels like to be the black sheep who is actually the only honest one, please leave a comment below. Share your story. Let me know I'm not alone. My name is Norma, and I'm finally home.